Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Coherent Connection. It has been a while since we last posted on this platform, but today's occasion is truly special. Today, on this episode, we are celebrating Majd Kamalmaz, a humanitarian who has dedicated his life to the service of refugees all around the world. This February, it marks the 3-year anniversary of his disappearance because he has been unjustly detained in Syria since February 2017. But today, on this episode, we want to talk more about Majd as a person and as a humanitarian. We want to share with the world more about his work and how it has impacted the lives of so many people all around the world. And as usual, with me here is Renata Crescenzo. Hi, Renata, and welcome.
Hi, Rhonda. Thank you so much. It's an honor for me to be here to share Maj's story today.
Thank you. As all of you know, Renata Crescenzo is a fellow HeartMath trainer. She has met Maj since she has known him since 2016. She had the chance to come to Lebanon and see his work in his centers in Lebanon. She was able to see how his work is impacting the lives of refugees in Lebanon, and she had plans to work with him even further. But today she will tell us more about how she met him. She will tell us more about his life, and also share with us what they are doing right now, what she is doing with his family, to shed more light on Marsh's case. So Renata, I give it to you.
Thank you so much, Rhonda. Yes, so I'm going to share today, as Rhonda said, the story of Maj's life and his work and his devotion to everyone suffering around the world. I mean, he has such a heart of compassion, and he's been doing this work since the 80s, and we're going to see a bit more about the impact that he's had on the world. I want to start off telling a little bit about his background. Maj was born in 1958 in Syria. And when I learned this story from his mom, when he was about 6 years old, he won the Syria's Most Beautiful Child contest through the Nestle's company. They were doing a contest to see who, people would submit photos, and Maj won. And you see him here in this little car. And as he was older, what started him in this work was he worked with adolescents as a teenager and really became interested in how he could help people, what we call psycho-emotionally, troubled youth. And that started him on his career as a therapist. And when he was a little boy, he shared a story with me that I found to be so profound and really a reflection of the person that he is. We were driving to the Arsal camp, and it was a long drive, and we had time to talk, and he shared a story of something that happened to him when he was a little boy. When he was about 6 years old, he said that he was playing in his yard, and in the distance, he saw a woman walking towards him down the street. And his words were, "Renata, I don't know how to explain it, but I found myself inside of her. I could feel what she was feeling. I knew she was tired. I knew she was thirsty. I knew she was hungry, and I knew that she couldn't go any further. And I went up to her and took her by the hand and brought her home to my mother so that my mother could feed her and care for her." And I spoke to Maj's mom about this, and she confirmed this story that yes, he brought this homeless woman to her to feed and to take care of. And he then proceeded to tell me that later on that day, while he was out playing in the street, a semi-truck came around the corner and struck him, not once, but twice. The tires of this truck went over him. And he said, "Renata, what do you think happened to me?" And I was like, "Oh no, I can't imagine. Maybe you broke your legs or it broke your back." And he said, "Nothing, absolutely nothing. I stood up and I brushed myself off and I walked away." And when he told me that, I got very emotional, and I said to him, "This story really touches me." And he said, "Why does it touch you?" And I said, "Because when you were telling me the story, I got a vision of angels covering you with their wings so that they could protect you from the wheels of that tire." And it brought to mind the scripture, "Be not forgetful to entertain stranger, for thereby some we entertained angels unaware." And there are stories in the Old Testament that talk about angels coming to earth to test us as humans, to find those who are holy and compassionate. And I think this woman may have been an angel there to test him. And it really speaks to Maj's empathy and compassion, that he had the ability to feel what others are feeling. And I think that that is what he was doing with his work. And I really learned about Maj, during a time where I was in transition in my life. I had left a career of as a software analyst of over 30 years in business, and was studying HeartMath as a trainer. And I read this article about Syrian refugees finding emotional ease amid chaos. And the story tells the story of Maj's work around the world, not just with Syrian refugees, but all of those who are in suffering, people who experience natural disasters. And I was so inspired by this story, realizing that I was free to go and help. And that's what I ended up doing. I contacted HeartMath, and they said, if you're really interested in meeting him, he's going to be receiving our annual humanitarian award at the conference in Cancun in 2 weeks. So come and meet him. And that's what I did. Maj was the 2016 recipient of HeartMath's Humanitarian Heart Award, which is awarded to those who are in service and bringing inner peace and balance and the HeartMath techniques and tools to people. And there's a clip that we're going to show now of Maj receiving the award. And this, I think, will really speak to his heart.
Because of the HeartMath approaches into heart-based appreciation, heart log, heart freeze frame, all these techniques that we learn from HeartMath. I appreciate HeartMath, and I'll speak on behalf of all the staff, all the beneficiaries that we have, really from the bottom of my heart. Thank you.
Great and deep honor, Majd, to present you with Humanitarian Heart Award from HeartMath Institute. And we also have a plaque in the back for your staff, which he insisted on. Said he would not take this honor himself, that it had to be shared with his entire staff. Thank you.
So that beautiful clip really shows just his humility, and you know, he received a standing ovation that day, and so well deserved for his service to so many. And when we met that afternoon, actually it was, you know, during that week, and he interviewed me for my volunteer work in Lebanon. And when he asked me, who do you want to serve? I told him that I'd wanted to work with the elderly because I had some experience working with them. And he said these words: the sign of a civilized society is how well they care for their weakest members. And he went on to say, and children and the elderly are our weakest members in our society. And there are those who are helping children, but no one right now is helping the elderly. And so I welcome you to come. And that was the plan, that we were going to begin a program in March. This was December of 2016 that we met and spoke at the conference in Cancun. And I was planning to come in March. And something told me, you know, when I got back home, maybe you should go earlier. And I contacted him about that and said, I'm feeling the pull to come sooner. And he said, I feel it too. So you come when you want. And I went in January, and it ended up that I was there to work with him and learn of his work 3 weeks before he went missing. I want to share a little bit about his work and about the International Institute for Psychosocial Development, IIPD. In this organization, you know, he founded this to help not only Syrian refugees, as I have mentioned here in Lebanon, but also all those who were affected by natural disaster. He used techniques to help people find relief from the stress and trauma of war and natural disasters. I want to also give tribute and honor and mention to his staff. His staff is like family to him. He felt a real commitment to them and to having them employed. Many of his staff were refugees who themselves had experienced this trauma and stress from the conditions of war. And he was able to teach them how to bring themselves into heart coherence. And those who were able to maintain their coherence, he brought them in as staff, and I think became like family to him.
The faces that you see in these photos, they're Fatima, Riyam, Rabi'a, Uruba, Hala, Rasha, Marwa. I hope I didn't forget anyone. Yeah, Riyam, I mentioned her, and Batul. So they are the members of his staff that you have seen, that you are looking at in these photos, and these are, you know, his family. And so they have always been sharing with me so many stories of how he was like a father to them. One of his staff, Majd, he helped him to get married, and he even asked the help of all the staff to help prepare for his wedding, and he even had him live with him in the center, because there was like a small apartment in the center where Majd lived, and he invited them to live with him, and they did. The bride and the groom, they lived with him for a few months, and they were working with him in the center. And so there's never a shortage of stories that tell of the generosity of Majd with his staff members. So it wasn't like a relationship of employees and boss. It was more like he was more like a father for them. So I really wanted to mention that and to share it with the world. And I sure hope the staff members will be able to rejoin on this call. Probably the connection is not helping them, but I hope they would be joining at the end of this presentation, and also share with us their experience about working with Majd.
Yes, beautiful. So I want to share some of the places that Majd worked in from 1999 and a number of years following. He was there in Kosovo and Bosnia, and we've had the great privilege of meeting with two of the women who worked with him there, our friend Esther and Sonia, two beautiful women who have really dedicated themselves to this kind of work of service, and who we've met following, the news of his disappearance. A number of us have all come together to share about Majd. He was also in New Orleans in the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina, delivering the HeartMath techniques and helping people who've lost, everything. He was also in 2006 in Indonesia post-tsunami, and another one of the women that worked with Majd, Mira, reached out to us, and so a lot of us have been connecting, and it's amazing to see all the lives that he's touched. And in 2013, is following the war in Syria, or the aftermath of those who've had to flee, he set up 2 centers in Bekaa and Arsal, Lebanon, and in Jordan, the aftermath of that Syrian conflict. This is a photo that I took when we were driving into the Arsal camp. And if you see him, this is his arm pointing as far as you could see in the distance, tents that the refugees, after many years, this was in 2016 and 2017, people still living in tents. And this is the center in Arsal, very modest, very humble, and we see one of his staff, a beautiful woman, Fatima, who did all this artwork on the walls to cheer up the place. Very dear, dear soul. And this is the center in the Bekaa Valley. And it was my first day. You see the photo on the right when I arrived at IIPD. These are a couple of photos from inside. And one of the things that really struck me was the sign in the therapy room, which read, in Arabic, "I want to live." And then it says to repeat, and then asks, how do you feel? And there are, it should be noted, there are many people who've been through trauma who didn't want to live. And that was part of Majd's mission, and still is, to give people hope, to help them want to live. This little boy, there are so many people that he was personally connected to and took a special interest in, such as this little boy, Mohammed, who he was personally counseling, whose father died in the Syrian war. He died in Syria, and he became like the head of his household and was in an accident where his head was scalped and he lost his hair, was always wearing this hat, and very heartbreaking, you know, that Majd asked me, when you return, will you help this boy get a wig or something? You know, he's at that tender age. And it just shows Majd's heart of compassion. Unfortunately, when Majd went missing, I wasn't able to go back, and the center closed. And we are still hoping to be able to find Mohammed. Another story that I experienced while I was over there was, you know, I think of Majd as a good Samaritan. He was driving to an appointment and he saw an old woman and a little girl walking down the street, and this old woman was leaning on this little girl. And he was concerned, and he pulled over and he stopped to see if they needed help. And it turned out that this grandmother was not feeling well and having her granddaughter help her walk to the hospital. So Majd stopped what he was doing and got them in his car and brought them back to the center. And here you see photos of his staff attending to this woman and to this little girl, and had the nurses check out the grandmother, the nurses at his center, and then enrolled the little girl in the program. And it just really shows how, you know, he had a heart for people. And even though he was on his way to an appointment, he stopped what he was doing and took the time where he saw the need. And I want to speak a little bit about the work that he was doing in therapeutic outreach. He devised a program where he would send his staff out to canvas with questionnaires that would try to assess the state of their trauma or stress. And there would be questions trying to determine, is there anyone having nightmares? Is anyone or any of the children having bedwetting problems? And that was a very common problem, and actually a condition that was epidemic with the war and the children is a term called enuresis, which is bedwetting, and it is a sign of trauma. And we were trying to identify those who were having these experiences to bring them into the program. And I want to say that this was a free program that was offered to anyone who fit the criteria of having trauma. And you see that there's this van. This van would go and on a schedule pick up these mothers and children to come into the center and get the therapy to help them come into inner peace and heart coherence. And on one of our outreaches, and I want to acknowledge Rhonda here. Rhonda came all that week when we were in our outreach as my translator. And I'm very grateful to you, Rhonda, for that. And while we were in the midst of this, you know, camp that was full of mud and, you know, despair, they gave us such hospitality. They pulled out this table and these chairs, and everyone came together and we had coffee together. It was really a beautiful experience in the midst of, you know, a despairing situation. Is there anything you want to share about that experience, Rhonda?
I think it's not something unusual, considering the hospitality of the Syrian people. regardless of their situation, regardless of where they are. This is something that we see from them all the time. So that was no surprise at all.
Yes, that's true. I've learned about the hospitality of Syrian people, having come to know Majd's family and their generous hearts and hospitality. I also experienced, in the camp, some exceptional needs that were very challenging. In this little camp, there were two needs that we recognized: a little girl who is deaf, who wasn't able to get an operation before she had to flee, and a little boy with Down syndrome. And, I just want us to have compassion for these really challenging situations, and how Majd is the one who would go and meet people where they're at and try to help and bring peace to these people. And this is his philosophical approach to trauma therapy: peace, positive, a fresh approach to initiate rehabilitation and recovery; emotions, a critical criteria for inner balance and life motivation; and client-centered, an approach that focuses on self-development and self-dependency and empowerment, promoting awareness of spiritual, health, and educational needs. Peace is his motto. Majd is the peace pro, and he spread peace wherever he went. In the program he developed for mothers and children, the I Can program, this program was developed to help alleviate the bedwetting and other symptoms of trauma that children had. It was a 6-week program he developed. What he taught me, and was very interesting to me, is that children entrain to their mothers. Children feel the same emotional energy, and if a mother is not in inner peace, if a mother is in trauma, it will be very difficult for the child to come into that sense of peace themselves, because they connect to the mother. So for a child to be enrolled in the program, the mother or father needed to join too, so that they could both work on becoming what we call in HeartMath, heart coherent, aligned in our heart and out of the confusion and the stress and the trauma that is in the mind. The story that he used was the one of Yusuf and his brothers. And it's the story of Joseph and his brothers in the Old Testament. And what's really beautiful about this story is it's shared in Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. And he could use this story wherever he went in the world to help children learn how to identify, feel, and express their emotions. And one of the things that Majd would leave the children with in the telling of this story, and what he would do is go through the story at each point in the story, help children recognize the emotion, the parts of the story where Joseph's brothers were jealous of him, or the part in the story where he was honored by his father with a coat, or the part in the story where he was sold into slavery, or the part in the story where he became the vizier at the end and rose to great glory. All of these steps along the way, Majd would help the children to recognize the emotion and to relate to these emotions and understand that there will be many ups and downs on the way to your happy ending. And just the way that Joseph eventually came to his happy ending is what is possible for all of us. Things do get better. And there are so many people he helped and so many lives that were transformed by his work. I don't know, Rhonda, if you wanted to hear anything about all of those that he's helped. You may want to comment.
I want to say that, his work in Lebanon is no less impactful than his work all over the world. And although we don't have the other numbers, the numbers of the refugees he was able to help in other countries, but since I have worked with him for a few weeks in Lebanon, I do have an idea of, the great impact of his work on the refugees in the area where the center was, in Bekaa area. It was, geographically close to the Syrian borders, and so he strategically chose that location because that is where the majority of the refugees were, and that is where he would have access to many people actually to help. And according to the statistics, that his staff had done at the centers in Lebanon, it's estimated that as of October 2016, IIPD staff members had conducted about 50,000 refugee field assessments. And I can't forget how, to me, this number is really huge. This is big, but Majd would always say, this is not enough. We have to do more. There are a lot more people who really need our help. We have to do something about that would, enable us to reach even more people. And he noticed that the female refugee was about 70% of the total refugee population. But the beautiful thing that I want to share with you all is that his programs in these few years in Lebanon were able to help more than 3,000 kids. He was able to heal those kids. So can you imagine the impact on the lives of these kids? They will grow up to be healthy members of the society. They will contribute positively to their society. Whereas if they were not, if they did not have access to these services, I don't know how they would, grow up to be people with so many trauma. And we all know how that affects people. And also, to continue on the numbers, the beneficiaries of the programs he had served to women were 1,755 women who were benefiting from all these programs. And he was helping these women become better moms for their children, become healed from the trauma of the war, and become positive contributors to their society, even within the refugee population. And he also helped men who are victims of war crimes and violence. More than 300 were able to benefit from these programs. So I know these are just numbers, and he wanted to do a lot more, but even knowing that what he has done for those people, it makes a lot of difference for them, because for someone who at some point had lost faith in life, or faith in himself, or who had lost hope that my life could get any better, Majd was able to help these people heal and have a different perspective on life, and move on in a healthy way.
Yes. And I also think about those he trained as facilitators of this work, and how their light and their knowing of these techniques is spreading from his work. So the number of people that he's helped is countless. We really don't even know the impact of what he's done. And I want to especially now acknowledge his family and how important Maj's family is to him. He really sacrificed a lot of time away from his family, but when you talk to his family, and I've come to know and love his family, they always mention how when he was with them, the quality of the time with him was unlike the quality of time with most people, that he would sit with you and look you in the eye and say, "How are you?" And he always made family a priority. He was always involved, loves his grandchildren. And I want to also acknowledge his wife, Hasna, who, we have these unsung heroes. Maj was on the front lines doing the work, but it was really with Hasna and his children's support, and their sacrifice of being away from him, that he was able to really accomplish his work. And I think, I want to lift them up and send them the light, for holding these 3 years of waiting in the unknown, and to really send our strength and admiration to them for their part in, bringing this light of love and service into the world. Without their support, he may not have been able to do as much as what he's done. And as we said, Maj is a man of peace. I think we all hate war, and I don't think I need to say much more, but Peace Pro is his nickname, and he'd always say, "Be in peace," as his moniker. And at the beginning of my talk, I shared the story of the woman that he helped, who he saw across the street. And, we saw the story of him winning that contest. And I want to say that I think that those stories that I shared may have been foreshadowing. The most beautiful child in Syria, I think, really speaks to the soul of Majd Kamalmaz, the most beautiful, maybe we would say the most beautiful soul in Syria, for all the service and the love and the compassion and the work that he's done. And the woman that he helped, that homeless woman that he felt himself inside of, we think of that perhaps she was an angel, coming to test and as a visitation. But I tend to think that perhaps it's Maj who is the angel, who's come into our lives to show us the way of service and love, and the inspiration of his life, helping selflessly all those in need around the world.
Yeah, I think anyone who knew Majd would agree to those words, Renata.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. And so I think I want to end here with his words, be in peace. And the heart of his service, I'm looking at the obelisk. It looks like this photo was taken in Washington, which is where we just spent a week, visiting congressmen and honoring him in a vigil. And I want to unmute everyone now. If anyone wants to share anything about Maj, I see Miriam is on the call, and Adam. I know, Adam, thank you for joining us. You met Maj when we were in Cancun, and so do you have anyone have questions? Maybe Miriam can answer, or anything anyone would like to say or share about Maj?
Well, I would just say that, I only met him briefly in Cancun at the HeartMath conference. And just between the presentation he gave and about the work he was doing, which was so clearly beneficial for so many people, but just his presence, he exuded being peace. He didn't even need to say it. Really, that was just the whole vibe, and it wasn't. It made enough of an impression that I continued to be interested in first in what he was doing, and Renata, you clearly you jumped right on it and went over there and did the work, and that to be greatly commended. It's just, and it's sad that he's been missing for so long, and for whatever is going on with that, for somebody such as Maj, who can, make such a difference in the world, the type of person we need more of in the world. And just in meeting him briefly, that came across so clearly. And
yes, that's true. I mean, he does emanate a light and a sense of peace and compassion. Anyone who's touched by him is impressed by him. And I'm sure wherever he is, he's sharing that light even now. So Miriam,
and thanks for and thanks for doing this. I mean,
of course, no, it's an honor for me.
Keeping that flame alive, and
yes,
in whatever way, and honoring somebody who truly deserves to be honored.
Yes, I agree. Miriam, could you share a little bit about, a number of people have asked me, is there any news or anything that you want to share about the situation? Or
first of all, I'd like to thank you, Renata and Brenda, for putting together this presentation and so beautifully talking about him in this beautiful way. And thank you, Adam, for joining us as well. Unfortunately, we still don't have any news about him. We don't know how he's doing or his exact location anymore. He seemed to kind of go missing. But we do know that prayer is the best thing we can all do for him. And if we can continue to pray, I think we all feel that with prayer, God will answer it, and he'll be back among us, continuing his work even stronger than before. So I think that's the most important thing. We keep that prayer.
Yes, I agree. And every Friday we're meeting and sending heart to him. We do a heart lock-in and send our love and the sense of freedom and gratitude to him. And we believe that, prayer helps, and sending heart really makes a difference and can change things.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Renata.
You're so welcome. Okay, well, if there's nothing else, I'm going to say goodbye, and we'll thank you so much, everyone who's watching, and Rhonda and Adam and Miriam for joining. And I know we had others who were on the call who may have dropped off because of the connection issues, but we're grateful to everyone who holds Maj in the light and is holding hope for his safe and soon return. And we thank you all. And until next time, I leave you with Maj's words, be in peace.